Hi and Assalamualaikum sir, we are from group 4 of MAC 1104E. So as for today, we are going to be presenting about the inflation and unemployment of the selected country, which is Singapore. So our group consists of 5 members, which is Nazmi Syazwan bin Jeffrey, Sarah binti Muhammad Suhami, Nur Ifan Najwa binti Muhammad Nasir, Luqman Hakim bin Sharudin, and me myself Nur Amni binti Muhammad Rusuk. Okay, so this is the content for our presentation, starting with the introduction, macroeconomic problems, measures and strategies on how to control inflation and unemployment, and lastly, conclusion. Okay, so I'll be starting with the flag of Singapore. So this is the flag of Singapore, and as for the geography of Singapore, Singapore is the largest port in Southeast Asia and one of the busiest countries on the planet. So Singapore joined the Federation of Malaysia in 1963 but succeeded on August 9, 1965 to become an independent country. So starting with the population of Singapore, so as of Tuesday, June 2028, 2022, according to World Meters elaboration of the most recent United Nations data, Singapore had a population of 5,941,558 people in total. So despite moving on to economic activities, the first economic activities in Singapore is electronics manufacturing and machinery. The next one is financial services, tourism, and lastly, world's busiest cargo seaport. Okay, so despite its limited domestic market and scarcity of natural resources, Singapore effectively survived the 1997 and 2008 financial crisis. So today, Singapore's economy is among the most stable in the world, with no foreign debt, substantial government revenue, and a constantly positive surplus. Okay, so Singapore's economy is primarily supported by exports of financial services, tourism, and also the busiest cargo seaport in the world. Manufacturing accounts for 20 to 25% of Singapore annual GDP, so making it the country's largest industry by far. Electronics, chemicals, biomedical sciences, logistics, and transport engineering are important industry classes in Singapore's manufacturing sector. So the manufacturing industry expanded by 35% in the third quarter of 2017 because of the strong demand for products for electronics and precision engineering. Other than that, with 18.5 million foreign visitors in 2018, which is more than 3 times of the country's whole population. Tourism in Singapore is a significant sector and economic contributor, and it also promotes natural and heritage conservation activities and makes environmental friendliness claims. Additionally, it has one of the lowest rates of crime in the entire globe, since English predominates among its 4 official languages. Conversing with locals in the nation, such as when shopping, is typically simpler for visitors to understand. Besides, the Port of Singapore is the world's busiest container port because it handles the most total shipping tonnage. Additionally, half of the annual supply of crude oil and a fifth of the world's shipping containers are transshipped there. So Singapore's strategic position has also contributed to its dominance in the shipping industry. The Port of Singapore handles 20% of the world's transshipment traffic. So Singapore is one of the countries with the best quality of life and one of the most popular countries among the tourists. For example, Universal Studio is a theme park with a location in Hollywood that would be on Travel's agenda. The park also one of the first of its type in Southeast Asia, features more than 20 themed areas inspired by well-known Hollywood films and television programs. Next, the National Museum in Singapore's is the most iconic location. So the museum chronicles the vibrant history and dense biography of the nation. You will experience an intimate and colorful trip through the museum that includes ancient Malay royalty, occupation during a war, nation building, food, and also fashion. Okay, so moving on to the inflation rate of Singapore. So as we can see, Singapore is having an inflation based on the statistics. So by measuring to the price index, this is the annual percentage change in the cost of acquiring goods and services for the average consumer. So Singapore inflation rate for 2020 was negative 0.18%, which is a 0.75 decline from 2019. So as for the year 2019, that the inflation rate was 0.57%, which is a 0.13 increase from 2018. As for the year 2018, the inflation rate was 0.44%, which is a 0.14 decline from the year 2017. Next one, moving on to the year 2017's inflation rate. The inflation rate was 0.58%, which is a 1.11% increase from the year 2016. As for the year 2013 until 2014, there is an increase by 1%. So moving on to the year 2012 until 2013, there was an increase at 2.4%. So as for the year 2011 until 2012, the inflation rate has decreased at 4.6%. So Singapore's inflation rate for the year 2010 until 2011 was 5.2%. And as for the year 2009 until 2010, the inflation rate was 2.8%. And 0.6% was for the year was on the year 2008 until 2009. So as for the year 2007 until 2008, the inflation rate decreased by 6.6%, and for the year 2006 until 2007, there was by 2.1%. And next, moving on to the year 2005 until 2006, the inflation rate increased by 1%. So for the year 2004 until 2005, the inflation rate increased at 0.5%. So moving on to the year 2003 until 2004, it has increased 1.7%. So from the year 2002 until 2003, the inflation rate increased by 0.5%, and from the year 2001 until 2002, decreased by 0.4%. And lastly, it is found that there is an increase by 1% for the year 2000 until 2001. So the next part is Singapore's unemployment rate. So that's all from me. So I'm going to pass this presentation to Sarah.
The next one is Singapore's unemployment rate. In Q1 of 2022, Singapore's unemployment rate was at 2.2%, placing at the lowest rate since Q3 of 2019. This is because the country managed to recover from the falling economy due to COVID-19 pandemic. The lowest number of layoffs ever recorded was 1,322 workers, down from 1,500 in Q4, and the lowest sprint ever. Layoff in the manufacturing sector increased, with those in the production of fabricated metals goods, machinery and equipment leading the way. This layoff resulted from the termination of a product line due to the removal of border restriction. Overall, employment increased by 42,000 as opposed to 47,900 in Q4. The next one is macroeconomic problem. The first one is inflation. Inflation is defined as a rise in the economy's overall price level. The phrase overalls mean an increase in the average price of all the product we buy, and not just one item or a specific group of item. When inflation increase, the value of money will be decreased and vice versa. For instance, during 2007 to 2008, the huge increase in global oil prices, which resulted high inflation around the world, including Singapore. The value of currency declined, causing current consumer money to purchase less now than it could yesterday. Low and steady inflation, on the other hand, is believed to be essential for future economic growth. Next, the measurement of the inflation. The most well-known standard on inflation is the annual percentage change in the Consumer Price Index, CPI, which measure the percentage change in the price of a basket of goods and services consumed by residents' household. This CPI is organized by the Department of Statistics (DOS) monthly. The type of goods and services included in the CPI, and their respective rate are updated once in the 5 years. Services inflation was greater in a part because of a bigger increase in the cost of other transport services and vacation spending. The CPI exclude non-consumption items such as purchases of financial assets. As we got here, the example of the group and category for housing and utilities, the category is bedroom furniture and fuel oil. Food, we got chicken, meat and breakfast cereal. Transportation, we got MRT fares and cars. The group for recreation, we got toys, television and sport equipment. Education and communication, books and telephone services. Clothing and footwear, we got women's dresses and men's shirt. The frequency of a price collection is determined by the market prices of a specific commodity, and service pricing changes have a larger impact on the CPI than those with lower weight. The next one is type of inflation. A consistent rise in the general price level due to an increase in aggregate demand is known as demand pull inflation. When aggregate demand grows, company will increase production, which will raise demand for factored input in the economy, resulting in a price increase. As a result, the cost of production in the economy will rise, causing businesses to raise price in protecting profitability. The amount of a rise in the general price level in response to a rise in aggregate demand will be determined by the status of the economy. The greater the rise in the overall price level, the closer the economy is the full employment equilibrium. Export in Singapore are generally increasing as the world economy is generally expanding, and hence the world income is generally rising. For example, in Singapore, a growth in export during the global economic recovery in 2010 resulted in a significant improvement in aggregate demand. To put it another way, the economy has a little or no surplus capacity. As a result, an increase in the aggregate demand might result in a significant increase in the overall price level. Next, types of inflation is domestic cost push inflation. It is a sustained rise in the general price level due to a rise in the cost of production in the economy because of domestic factor independent of demand. For example, worker will bargain for higher wages to maintain purchasing power when they expect prices to rise. They will also bargain for higher wages when they have greater bargaining power due to a tighter labor market. Domestic cost push inflation may be more significant than imported cost push inflation. Due to several reasons, as the labour market in Singapore are typically tight, as the Singapore economy is generally at or near the full employment equilibrium. Therefore, services account for about 2/3 of the Singapore economy, and services producing industry are labour intensive. As a result, the Monetary Authority of Singapore (MAS) has agreed to tighten monetary policy in two ways. The first one is MAS will recenter the midpoint of the exchange rate policy range at the current dollar NIM level. Second, the MAS will slightly raise the rate of appreciation of the policy band to maintain the inflationary calming impact. The Monetary Authority of Singapore (MAS) also will keep a close eye on foreign event and the implication for the Singapore economy. So I'll pass to Nazul.
So right now I will explain about impacts of inflation. The anticipated inflation will bring about positive effect as it stimulates market growth, resulting in higher profit and increase in production, hence a reduction in employment. As in Singapore, Increased prices will depreciate an individual's wages and saving as well as discourage excessive spending. The unanticipated inflation is the inflation that comes before the people had time to adjust fully to its present. So next, I will explain about condition of unemployment in Singapore. According to the data that we have researched, unemployment in Singapore rises every year in the month of June. This happened because in June, fresh graduate and students finish their studies and looking for jobs. Because of this, the number of unemployment has risen significantly in the month of June. Percentage becomes normal at the end of the year because students go back to school and only fresh graduate go to work. So the condition of current year unemployment in Singapore. As we can see in the data shown, in quarter 1 of 2022, Singapore's unemployment rate was at 2.2%, placing the lowest rate since the third quarter of 2019. In April 2022, unemployed labour force was counted at 2.2%, which consists 72,400 residents and 64,800 citizens. The lowest number of layoffs ever recorded was 1,320 workers, down from 1,500 in fourth quarter, and this is the lowest print ever recorded. So there are two types of unemployment occurred in Singapore. The first one is cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment is known as demand deficient unemployment, mainly happen because of the increase in the cost of production. So the company took the initiative to let off a very huge amount of workers to cut costs. The second type of unemployment that Singapore faces is structural unemployment. Structural unemployment arises from industries' structural deterioration, inability to compete, adapt to changing customer needs and new products, or changes in production process. So there are three types of effect of unemployment in Singapore. The first one is individual effects. A jobless person does not have money to pay for their utilities, rent, and many more due to the lack of money because of unemployment. The second effect of unemployment is from economic effect. Unemployment will only lead to a waste of resources because there are resources ready to go, but there are no workers to successfully convert them into finished good. And the last one is social effect. Low quality housing, fewer recreational possibilities, limited access to public transportation and other public services, underfunded school, and limited work opportunities are all more prevalent in areas with high unemployment rates.
So we are moving to the next part, which is about strategies to control inflation and unemployment. So for inflation, we have two methods that we can use to control inflation. So the first one is about fiscal policy. Contractionary fiscal policy is a government reduce the inflationary pressure on its economy by implementing a budget surplus. The two tools of budget surplus are reducing the government expenditure or increasing taxation to decrease aggregate demand. So the second method, that is monetary policy. There are a few ways that government can use to control the inflation. The first one is about open market operation. In time of inflation, the public is offered government securities, short-term bonds, or treasury bills on the open market by the central bank in effort to limit bank deposit and commercial bank ability to extend credit. The second one is about raising required reserve ratio. All commercial banks are required to maintain a certain minimum amount of cash with the central bank, known as the required reserve ratio. The central bank will raise all the commercial banks' required reserve ratio in the case of inflation. The third one is about raise the interest rate. The commercial bank will be instructed by the central bank to increase the interest rate they pay on customer deposit. For the last one is about the method of qualitative instrument or direct credit control. It's about encourage bank to exclusively offer credit to certain product or companies, such as only allowing loans for export or investment.
So for the measures or strategies and employment, so this is a define of measures by the unemployment rate, which is the number of unemployed people as a percentage of the labor force. There are two fiscal policy, which is increase government expenditures and decrease taxes. So for the increased government expenditure, supportive initiatives were able to reduce the expected unemployment rate in 2020 by 2 percentage points from 6.1 to 4.1%. Government of Singapore introduced schemes like the Job Support Schemes (GSS), SG United Jobs and Skills Package and Job Growth, which will increase the government expenditure. So for the decreased taxes, government spending and taxation are the two primary tools of fiscal policy. And Singapore's government can try to reduce their tax rate, such as service tax, sales tax, income tax, and corporate tax. So next, there's monetary, and there's four for monetary. The first one is open market operation. Growth in the consumption and investment will boost over demand production and while decreasing cyclical unemployment. The second one is lowering the required reserve ratio. The increased ability of commercial banks to lend, there will be more money available to support economic growth and lower unemployment. For the third one is lowering the base lending rate. The central bank reduced the cost of borrowing money for loans, which encourage business to invest more by hiring more people. And the last one for monetary is lowering the interest rate. This will encourage people to spend more their money. The central bank will instruct commercial banks to decrease their interest rate on deposit so that people will borrow the money. So we jump to the conclusion. Inflation is the overall rise in the prices of goods and services over time. The most significant impacts of inflation are consumers, investors, and the economy. Because there is too much money chasing too few resources, inflation will happen even if neither supply nor demand have changed. The economy cannot function at its full capacity when there is high unemployment, and inflation can lead to unstable currency values that increase living costs. Structural changes to an economy are what really cause inflation and unemployment. In order to advance the nation, the government of Singapore must be aware of both inflation, and unemployment. So that's it from our group. Thank you, sir.